Okay, awesome. Well, for those of you who are tuning in from Chronicon Official, we are getting to talk to none other but the acclaimed astrologer and one of my best friends, Jennifer Racioppi. And I'm so excited that you're here. So thank you for being here with us, Jen.
Oh my God. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really pumped. And I wanted you all to talk to Jen or hear from Jen today. Please make sure that you can ask us questions using the question function or in the comments if you have questions for Jen as we're having this conversation. But why I wanted you to hear from Jen tonight especially is because Jen has one of the most amazing stories that I have ever heard. And every time I tell someone Jen's story, even though I've known her for like 7 years now, I get goosebumps and I get full body chills. And it's just, her resilience is so palpable that it really just makes a tremendous difference in my life to know someone like her. And so I wanted you all to hear from her. And I also wanted her to talk to us about the astrology, sort of selfishly, but I also know that you all would appreciate this very much. So, Jen, thank you for being here. And I'd love for you to just start out by sharing, you talk to people about astrology and what's going on astrologically. And you also do incredible work with your lunar logic work and talking to people about the lunar cycle, the moon cycle. And there's a really profound reason for why you needed to actually learn about the cycles of the moon. So can you sort of just start off by telling us that story?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say I am definitely an astrologer. And in addition to being an astrologer, I'm also a integrative medicine health coach, trained at Duke University, a positive psychology coach, trained under Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who now teaches at Columbia, used to teach at Harvard, Dr. Maria Sarwa, who's one of the leading resilience experts in the world, a holistic health counselor, a yoga teacher. So what I do is I blend this all together. And my, at what Nitika's getting at with my personal story is that like many of you tuning in, my journey towards being a healer, if you call it, really began with my own healing crisis. Yeah. And it was a long and winding road that led me here, and even to how I synthesize all this information. My journey began as a teenager, really even as a preteen. When I got my first period, my menstrual cycle was really let's just say challenging. It was an unhealthy cycle. So when I began my menstrual cycle, it was very painful and just problematic from day one. And I spent most of my teenage years trying to just figure out what was wrong with me. I would go to doctors and try to understand, why was I in so much pain? Why were my periods longer than they needed to be, painstakingly longer than they needed to be, so painful. And quite frankly, there was big mental health consequences for me. And I don't know, who knows what came first, what caused what, but, I had really deep depression, anxiety that accompanied all this. And so my teenage years were, I like to call it the SSRI shuffle. I was taking off one antidepressant, put on another antidepressant, and go to the doctor again and again and again with these hormonal issues, and they just put me on the pill. And I was a wreck. I was a high performing, high functioning teenager with a ton of spunk and a ton of a big spirit for sure. But my body wasn't happy. And maybe 6 weeks after I graduated high school, I had a tumor erupt in my ovary that was the size of a bowling ball. So I am 5 feet tall. At that time, I weighed about 96 pounds, and I had this protrusion in my belly that I knew was there, and I had gone to find out what was wrong with me, and again, dismissed and not validated at all. And it was a hot July afternoon. I think it was July 22nd, 1997, actually. You just don't forget these dates. Okay. And I buckled over in pain. It was the worst pain I ever felt in my entire life. I was alone. I literally crawled to the phone because I couldn't even get up and walk, and just dialed 911. Didn't call my parents, didn't call a friend, just was like, I need an ambulance now. And I got myself to the hospital, and, you know, immediately they were trying to find out if I was pregnant. I definitely wasn't pregnant. They were trying to find out what I just ate. They thought maybe I had food poisoning. And, you know, and who all, I just share all this because who all has ever had an issue like that where you were in a medical emergency and just repeatedly the issue was minimized. Yeah. And it maybe took 6 or 7 hours of emergency care before they realized that they needed a gynecological surgeon stat, because I had this tumor, my left ovary, totally erupting, and they needed to get it out immediately. So they, you know, got me to sign off on a surgery. I had an immediate surgery, and within a few days, I was given the diagnosis of an aggressive ovarian cancer. So again, I was 18 years old. I had just graduated high school. And, you know, I did a lot of searching around that. So we got a lot of second, third, fourth opinions, etc. And what turned out not to be an ovarian cancer. It turned out to be, I forget what they would call it now, but it was like a borderline situation. And so rather than put me on chemo at that point, they had already removed the tumor and the ovary. They just put me on a really strict watch. And so the next year I actually went to college. I was still a hot mess. And they put me back on the pill. They put me back on antidepressants. And they said, we're just going to watch you. And 1 year later, almost to the day, I was at the doctor for a checkup. And they saw that there was suspicious cell growth now in my uterus and my uterus lining. And they did another biopsy. And at that point, they determined that I had endometrial cancer, which then, of course, I went and I got all the opinions, and it was confirmed endometrial cancer. And I was pretty much told that my only option was to have a radical hysterectomy, which was a surgical process to remove my uterus, my cervix, and then they recommended removing my other ovary because they still were just unclear as to whether or not I really had ovarian cancer definitively. But since ovarian cancer is so hard to detect, they recommended having that other ovary removed as well.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And one would think that after your cancer is removed, life would be better than ever, but not for me. That was really just the beginning of a really hard time, because I went into what's referred to as surgical menopause. So I was now 19 at this time. And I went into menopause overnight, which is a really, really, really rough transition to leave your reproductive years and enter into menopause is usually this long process of a perimenopause phase where your hormones naturally wane and your body adjusts. And over time, you lose your hormones in that way. Well, for me, it happened immediately. And I was a teenager, so I hadn't fully developed yet. You know, my bones hadn't fully developed. My psychology certainly hadn't developed. I was nowhere near ready to deal with all that came along with menopause. And I didn't even know what was menopause, right? Like I knew it. Yeah, I mean, no one told
I'm like
me.
almost 40 and I barely still understand all the ins and outs of menopause. It's a big deal.
It's a thing. So So I knew I couldn't have kids. I mean, that was like biology 101 there, people. But I didn't know that what estrogen did. And I didn't know how crazy I'd feel without it. And I went into shock. I went into extreme shock. I had some severe panic depressive episodes after that. I ended up needing to drop out of college. It was so bad. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. And I was a pretty solid, you know, I mean, even with all that I went through entering into college, I was still like a straight A Dean's List sort of, I mean, I didn't get all straight A's, but pretty, you know, like Dean's List student. And now I found myself just, I couldn't even read. I couldn't even write. Like, couldn't focus. I was having panic attacks to the point where I didn't know what the hell to do. And I was still trying, but it led me to drop out of college. And I kind of had it. I kind of had it with Western medicine. I kind of had it with all of it. And, you know, my story is that as a child, I had suffered from sexual assault. And I had a lot of pain, a psychosomatic, emotional pain, just a lot of pain there. And I knew that if I didn't get right with myself, that my body just couldn't get right. You know, like I had already had 2 cancer diagnoses. One was rescinded, but still pretty radical diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so I took off and I went on a healing journey. This was pre-internet. I mean, no, I did have email at the time, but there was no, maybe the internet did exist, but it was like basically for email and porn, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, and when there was no Instagram, there were no
pretty limited. Yeah.
Yeah, there were no wellness influencers. There was no well and good. I had to go and find some answers. And so I moved to California and just started exploring absolutely everything I could, you know, the full range, you know, holistic health remedies, alternative medicine, well, you name it, I did it, psychedelics, whatever I could find. I would just try to like see what would help me heal. And that was like a pretty solid 18 months of that. And I found myself living in Lake Tahoe. And I had a tarot reading with this woman who basically sat me down and like read my cards as though she was reading my soul. So creepy, so weird. And she was just named the whole thing, you know, my whole life story, what I was going through, the fact that I didn't have a feminine rhythm, the fact that I had gone through this really aggressive illness, and that if I didn't figure out what it was I really wanted to do and who I really was, she just saw me getting sick again. And it felt so believable. And at that time I was going back to college, and I was considering going to some pretty prestigious colleges on the East Coast, or gambling and staying longer on the West Coast. And her whole thing to me was, you have to figure out what you really want to do if you really want to heal. Yeah. And then she also told me that I was very connected to, I was pretty intuitive. She said a lot, but it was basically, she was bringing up the point that I could work with the moon's phases and the cycles of the moon to recreate the cycle in my body that was taken away as my cancer fix. So that was August of 2000. No, it must have been July of 2001. And so I figured it out. I was like, I'm moving to San Francisco. That's what I really want to do. I transferred colleges to San Francisco, and I started doing lunar rituals multiple times a month, you know, setting intentions with the new moon, and then doing all these subsequent lunar phase activities to start to see if I could recreate this cyclical journey of what would have been my menstrual cycle. So for those of you who don't know, the moon cycle and the menstrual cycle have very similar phases. And one way, if you're going through period pain and or irregular periods, if you've gone through premature menopause, if you're perimenopause and your cycle's out of whack, if you're prepubescent and you're just starting out and you just want to know what this cycle is, if you're postmenopause, or if you're just a, you know, solidly cycling healthy woman, the moon's dance is very similar to the feminine reproductive cycle. And so I didn't know this. And I also didn't know that the moon could help me like live a more spiritually healthy life and be a part of my therapeutic process and my healing. So it was all brand new for me. And I will say that since I had that reading and then had subsequent mentoring with this woman, I really haven't missed the lunar cycle since. You know, it's been the crux of my existence, and it hasn't cured me of my pain. I've had to do a lot of work, and I still have a lot of pain. But it gave me a path. Where I was rudderless, I now had a practice. And
I love that so much. That really speaks to me, because like at Chronicon, you know, and I know you and I as friends talk about this all the time, like we're not about being prescriptive, like this is the only way. And I don't know, I get so emotional. Every time I talk to you about health stuff, I get so emotional. But yeah, it's just so inspiring to me that we're so, like, you talk about resilience so much in everything that you do. And this to me is such a story of tangible resilience. It's not about, you know, being sick one day and the next day we're healed or we're cured, or, you know, that's not what it's about at all. It's about just like putting one foot in front of the other and figuring out like, how do I take the next step? And what's going to make me feel better today and like every single moment, and not, you know, in this sort of grand sweeping thing. It's like every cycle, every time the moon changes, you're going through this entire, you know, discovery process. And yeah, it just really moves me so much.
No, I mean, it's real. It's real. And, you know, resilience, I think people get tripped up on what that means, because I think people think actually the technical resilience is like toughness, you know, or like to bounce back stronger. But resilience requires impeccable sensitivity, and it really just means to meet life exactly as it is. So it's not making it something that it's not. Like if you're a hot mess, give me a heart or a thumb up if you've ever felt like you're a hot mess or you're a hot mess today.
Yeah.
You get to be a hot mess, right? You just get to be a hot mess with skill. So that
so true. It's so true. I so appreciate that, because I feel like that's what Chronicon is about. And for sure, I know that's what all your content is about. It's not about this like polished experience. Who has that? It's not real, you know? So I love that you know, just really give people permission. And I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about like what's happening right now and, you know, all of that. When you and I had our chat yesterday, we were just talking about, you know, people need a little bit of understanding of what's happening right now. And I know that that's something that you can help us with.
So what's the question? What the fuck? I'm going to curse.
So I know we talked yesterday when we sort of talked about what we wanted to talk about. We just were like, what is the astrological forecast, even just for the next few weeks? Because we really can't think, you know, more than that. And how do we, given the rhythm, which is the lunar cycle, and I know there's like a moon happening tomorrow or something. I don't know. Just like, you know, take it away.
You know, I like to say, what the F is going on?
Yeah.
That was the question. What the F is going on?
Basically.
So yeah, guys, whoa, things are heavy, huh? Tonight is the full moon in Scorpio. So let's just begin there. What's a full moon? A full moon happens obviously when we see a bright moon in the sky and it looks full. We never see a full moon. It's an optical illusion. We're only ever seeing half the moon. Why? Because the moon is round, right? But we see the full moon when the sun and the moon are in opposition to one another, and the sun can receive, or the moon can receive all the sunlight, and then that gets reflected back to us. So the full moon perfects, honestly, at 6:45 a.m. tomorrow morning, which means that tonight, when the moon rises, it's rising full. And we'll feel the full moon all day tomorrow, and it's in the sign of Scorpio. So right now, the sun is in Taurus. The sun in Taurus is a very earth grounding influence. It's the middle of spring, so we're halfway from the spring equinox to the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, and opposite in the southern hemisphere. And this is actually a very sacred time, because the sun in Taurus is about fertility and rebirth in the northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere is still about grounding, right? So it's a very grounding time. And then the moon opposite in Scorpio is really about getting in touch with our pain body. Scorpio doesn't hold back. So it's an all-in sign. It's fixed, which means that it's intense. It's water, which means it's emotional. And when it's opposite the sun in Taurus, we have this very sacred axis activated, which is our body and our emotions. So we talk so much about our mind and our body, and our mind, body, spirit. We very rarely talk about our mind emotion axis. And that's really what we're saying, I think, when we're talking about our mind and body. But this particular full moon brings our emotions up more than others. All full moons are kind of a wild card, or they can feel big, and they activate everyone in different ways. One of the things I teach in Lunar Moon School is to actually track the moon, so you know how the moons impact you, rather than coming to an astrologer to be told, right? No one knows you better than you. So the best thing you could do is just pay attention and see what's coming up for you.
Yeah.
That said, you know, a full moon is going to bring things up, and the full moon in Scorpio is going to invite in an intense look at what's going on in your emotional body, your history, your shame, your shadows, your pain, your past. This full moon is in a trine to Neptune. Neptune's really spiritual. So that's lovely. But there are some other really challenging things happening. We've been in the cycle so far. Obviously, we saw COVID breakout, which we don't need to talk about here, which is to say that there was an astrological corollary to when that hell broke loose here in the US. And those transits pretty much carry through the end of the year. That's not to say we're going to be in this situation till the end of the year. Nobody knows. It's just to say that the astrological corollary that was going on when COVID broke out doesn't really clear up until, I'm going to even go as far as to say December 17th, December 20th, the end of the year, because we're in this really intense, we're in multiple cycles ending, and we're in multiple cycles beginning. So we are in a massive conclusion. And the big picture here is we're moving from Earth cycles where we've had a lot of these, they're great conjunctions, and that we're in a great mutation. These are fancy astrological words that we're not going to explain what they mean. But we've been in cycles that have been primarily around Earth, ambition, drive, government, money. And these have been going on for hundreds of years. And we're turning the wheel, and we're coming into a cycle that's all about air, our capacity to communicate, our creativity. And that really, really comes into play at the end of 2020. So these are not small cycles that we're in. These are huge, multiple generation defining cycles. And we are the stewards of that transition. And if you're on Chronicon Official, you're here, you're sensitive in some way. You have a sensitivity to something. And I'm going to go out on a ledge to say that your sensitivity, your chaos is also your medicine, right? So whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is that you've gone through that's made you even aware of Nitika is part of the story. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say around the medicine you're bringing into this next epic of our lives. And so 2020 is this big, major turning point. Many generations in the making, right?
Yeah. I mean, I thank you so much for sharing that, because I know we've talked about that just privately as friends, but I find that as much as people's first instinct when you say it's a year of endings is to be like, oh no, like this is, so much is going to end and whatever. I really hear the beginning that you talk about on the other side of that, and how everything that you say makes so much sense around how we've been so, career driven and like results oriented. And that's really it. And for people who have chronic conditions, it's not like we aren't working or, doing a ton of things in our lives and living our lives to the absolute fullest that we can. But our way of living life and our rhythm, like you talk about so much, has really not been valued in a lot of ways, and has not been, given a seat at the table in a way that I know we both agree needs to change. So as much as you say that there's so many endings, I feel like that gives me some hope.
Yeah, sister. I mean, like, I almost want to know, like, what you're saying. Like, where's those hearts? Because it's like, give me an amen. We've got to make, you guys, like, there's a lot that's not great about how we've been living as a society. And it's okay for these cycles. We need these cycles to end. The earth needs these cycles to end. Our sanity needs these cycles to end. And as the chronic illness community knows better than anyone else, our health requires a more sane way of being with each other and with ourselves and with this planet. And so the macro, right, is that we're moving from earth to air, and air is a whole new energy. And I just think that there's a lot of room for creativity. I heard an astrologer say, and I don't remember who, actually I heard it from ISAR, who's an Institute for Astrological Research. And they were recapping some of this, and I don't know who wrote it, but they were saying that, like, in this new epic we're moving into faster than we realize, that it's not about when you die, how many toys did you have, right? Like, that's like what life has kind of been defined by. Like, our whole existence, our parents' whole existence has been by acquire. The more you have, the more status you have, the more status you have, the more power you have, the more power you have, the more you're in control. And that's kind of like ending, right? It's scary.
Yeah.
But we got to let it go. We got to almost have a funeral for it.
Mm-hmm.
And what's on the other side of this is, where's your creativity at? What are your ideas? Where's your community? How do you express yourself? Oopsie. And if you don't have a really solid handle on that, I do believe that like you're not going to be, and I don't want to say like there's some punitive around it. There's a massive invitation for you to get real. And whereas success has been defined by dying with the most amount of toys, we're moving into a paradigm where it's not about that. It's about what did you contribute intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, from a creative center.
Yeah. That's so great. And what comes up for me when you say that is that like we've never been, you know, the poster child for like, oh, we need to acquire all that stuff, right? Like that's not the way we live our lives, but it's intrinsic in the way life is lived, right? And so even with us like wanting to be more spiritual and doing so much more maybe than that poster child for, you know, acquiring things does, it's still so hard. And we're still just caught in the loop of, you know, acquisition and running and pushing and building and growing and like being valued or thinking that we're valued by that metric system, by that way of measuring. And I've even just been feeling in this quarantine, I've had to really take time with finally kind of catching up to the fact that like, I do have time to take care of myself in a way that I haven't necessarily been able to before. I do have time to do things for myself that I have always put other things as a priority before I've put that thing, you know, and sort of sinking into, can that be enough for me? You know what I mean? Like, can that be enough for me to value myself? That's really what it comes down to value myself with saying, I cooked for myself today. I took the medication I had to take. I called a friend and checked in and had connection and community. I worked out. And, you know, is that enough for me? And do I find myself valuable? So I hear all of that in what you're saying as well.
Is it enough for you?
It's starting to be, honestly, it's starting to be. I think initially, like with the first half of quarantine that happened, there was just a lot of fear of like, you know, if this is it, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, how do I fit into society? And I think just even over the last week, I have felt like, I don't know, I think I felt the change overall, like the shift overall, not that we've changed, but the turning a little bit overall enough to feel like I can sort of carve out my own space in that and say like, no one knows what the hell is going on. No one knows how we're going to be doing business next year. No one knows, you know, all of the things, right? So like, what can I just know for myself and be okay with? And that has started to happen. I can honestly say that.
See, okay, so then that in there, right where you said, is like the perfect mirror of where we're at astrologically right now, right? Yeah. So everything you just said around, is valuing and loving myself enough for me to feel worthy and okay, right? Or do I have to like feel frustrated that I can't tick these boxes on what I think I need to do to feel like I'm succeeding or getting ahead? Yeah. And on this full moon, I think that that's a great place to be. The nodes of fate just switch signs. So the nodes of fate are the points in the sky where the moon's path intersects with the sun's apparent path, the ecliptic. And that's where we have the eclipse points. And they were just in Capricorn and Cancer for about 18, 19, 20 months. And now they moved into Gemini and Sagittarius. I'm not going to explain what that means. I'm just going to say that a major cycle just switched yesterday. We have the full moon today. Next week, we have 3 planets going retrograde. We have Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus all going retrograde. So we're entering this heavy retrograde season. Venus retrograde happens from May 13th to June 25th. Venus rules what we love and why we love it. And when Venus goes retrograde, like, it's easy to take the bait. It's easy to be like, I don't like the way I look, or I gained weight during quarantine, or I need new clothes, or I did it, and make it very about like how we visually appear. Venus, what we love and how we love. And oftentimes we as women and or non-binary and or gender-free people so oftentimes we judge ourselves based on whether or not we like our appearance. And that's like the tip of the iceberg. Underneath all that is like, who are we really, right? And so as we go into this heavy retrograde season, we're coming into a time where it's like, what do I value? Why do I value it? How can I honor my values more? How can I be more real? And I'm going to suggest that really participating in that exercise, particularly between now and like right after 4th of July. So eclipse season ends July 5th. Mercury's going retrograde, and in addition to all these other planets, Mercury will also go retrograde June 18th to July 12th. And so between now and I'm going to even safely say July 25th, we are in this intense moment of integration. And the opportunity is if we can go there and ask those tough questions and settle down, just settle down, like basics, like, can I be with myself? Am I enough? Do I love myself? Can I accept who I am? Can I make the most of what I have now, rather than judge myself against the standards I set for myself when I entered this new year, or last year, or who I thought I needed to be, or this upcoming birthday, or whatever the markers are that we use for credibility in our own life. And just integrate that. We're preparing ourselves massively for this big launch that we're going to have at the end of 2020. So 2021 is a very different frequency. It's a very different energy. And to succeed in 2021, just to say, to succeed in the new paradigm, the new future, we have to do this. And not to say if we don't do the work now, we won't succeed. It's not an either or. There's we're not going to get punished, right? Yeah. It's just to say that it's an opportunity. We could take advantage of this moment right now and get ready so that we can enter into this era of contribution, as Red Carrot says so beautifully in her comments. With something to give. Authentic originality. If it's not original, we're not going to need it anymore. It's like, who wants anyone imitating someone else? Like, come on, we got to get over that. And just get right with who we are and bring that. And that's what this is.
I love that so much. And I could talk to you for 5 more hours. I think we need to do like another post, maybe Mercury retrograde and like all of these things happening. Maybe we should come back into IG Live and do a little download about how all that integration was. But I know that we have to wrap up our Chroniconvo, but I just am so grateful that you gave us some of your time. And also I do feel just that, the planets, I don't really know anything about the planets. I just call you and ask you all my questions. But there is, but like, I know that as a highly sensitive person who has a chronic condition, which is a lot of what we talk about at Chronicon, the rhythm of the universe and of the planets and of the moon and all of that, I feel it so deeply. And it's only been through your work or through, looking into some of the things that are going on where I'm like, oh, actually, I'm feeling exactly what is in the moment right now. I just had no idea. So I encourage all of you to follow Jen and to follow all of her work through her Lunar Logic program. She has really cool free things that she does. She has big programs that she does. She has a ton of Instagram content. So I really encourage you to follow her. And thank you so much for being here with us, Jen.
Oh my God. Thank you so much.
Love you lots. I'll see you later.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Bye. Bye.